Last year, Brian Daboll stepped in his first year as the Giants head coach, threw together a bunch of broken twigs and scraps, and somehow assembled a team that won a road playoff game. And in this deep dive series, we reveal every team in order of my power rankings for the upcoming season, and many of you have felt for a few episodes now that the Giants are ranked just too high at 13. And I just want to remind you that the Giants were better than half the teams in the league last year, but this time around they actually have a real NFL roster. I can't wait to get into that roster as well as this coaching staff and the areas of this team that do make me a little bit higher on the Giants, as well as, of course, where their weaknesses are that I'm sure those that are lower on the Giants would like to point out. We also, by the way, have a fantastic guest for today's deep dive, Bengal, another NFL YouTuber here on the platform, big Giants fan despite the name, joins us for an awesome interview. You're not going to want to miss it. We will get into that after I break down the schedule and this team's win total projections towards the back end of the video. But before we do get started, a lot goes into this series. If you could just please take a second to hit that like button down below. It really does help. It's a free and easy way to support my channel, helps this video get more views. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe. We've got 12 more of these yet to go before the season starts. You're not going to want to miss them. But let's get into it. First of all, starting with this team's offseason, which was definitely a good one. Like I said, this team had a roster much in need of repair, especially at a couple position groups that they really focused on. But let's go piece by piece. The coaching staff, fortunately for Giants fans, is going to stay the same. It was a great group last year. They're running it back with them. They don't lose Mike Kafka, their offensive coordinator, somewhere else. He's back, which is great news. Then at quarterback, no change. They bring back Daniel Jones. At running back, slight upgrades. I would say they did work things out to maintain Saquon Barkley here. More good news to run it back there. But in the 5th round, they bring in Eric Gray out of Oklahoma, and they just picked up James Robinson, the veteran running back. At tight end, massive upgrades there. They do say goodbye to Tanner Hudson that played about a quarter of their snaps, but they're not going to miss him as they bring in Darren Waller, the star tight end from the Las Vegas Raiders, one of their big moves this offseason. And then holy buckets, as you look at this wide receiver group, when we alluded at the start of the video to this team really just having a bunch of scraps and garbage to work with, a lot of that pointed to that wide receiver room, and it was insane, the different pieces that they were trying to work with. And they're going to say goodbye to a lot of bodies, only 3 of which got quote-unquote significant snaps last year. That's going to be Richie James, the best of these 3 that's going to head to Kansas City. But then Kenny Golladay, there's like YouTube videos out there now talking about how big of a bust he was with the Giants, so he's finally gone. And then Marcus Johnson, another one of those kind of street pickups that did play a decent amount for them but won't be missed. And then they added like 2 whole position groups worth of wide receivers. If you factor in the players that they're getting back from injuries that weren't able to go for them last year, it's crazy. They looked at what happened last year, and Brian Daboll was like, F that. That is not going to happen again this year. They might carry 8 receivers this year with their offseason approach. But they bring in Paris Campbell from the Colts. They expect to get Wan'Dale Robinson back, their 2nd-round pick, who got hurt halfway through the year. They bring in the speedy Jalen Hyatt in the 3rd round out of Tennessee. Sterling Shepard gets brought back in a 1-year deal. Jamison Crowder, veteran slot wide receiver, along with Cole Beasley, another veteran slot wide receiver. Even someone like Colin Johnson missed last season. They could have used a guy like Colin Johnson, who's not a big name, but he's a capable NFL wide receiver, which were few and far between in New York last year. And then even dishing out some cash for a priority free agent in Bryce Ford Wheaton, I believe was the highest paid priority free agent around the league this year, and he's going to be fighting for a roster spot. So they just were not playing around, bringing in as many bodies as they could, despite the fact that there wasn't a lot of super high-end receivers available on the market. They're at least hoping to fill out the group with real NFL players. And you look at this list and say they're going to be able to do that this year. Then you look at the offensive line. I do see this as upgraded, even though 2 kind of borderline starting caliber players are leaving in Nick Gates, who only was able to go about 40% of their snaps. But John Feliciano did start every game on the interior for them. But they spent a 2nd-round pick stealing John Michael Schmitz Jr. out of Minnesota. that alone, I think, will make this an upgrade. So either net neutral or positive across the board with the offense. And then you look at the defense, and I think you can say the same. The interior defensive line, they already have a lot of talent there, but they only get better. They do say goodbye to some measly veterans in Justin Ellis and Nick Williams, but they bring in A'Shawn Robinson from the Rams, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, an underrated player from the Bucs, and a 7th-round pick in Jordan Riley out of Oregon. So I see that as upgraded in terms of key depth for them. Edge, slightly upgraded. They're trusting Azeez Ojulari to get back healthy big time. They didn't really add a whole lot there. They didn't lose a whole lot either. But when you look at the fact that guys like O'Shane Ximenez and Jihad Ward played like 1,400 snaps or something between the two of them, you hope Azeez Ojulari can get out there healthy and be an upgrade, and I think that's fair to say. At linebacker, obvious upgrades here. They do say goodbye to Jalen Smith, who actually stepped in off the street and plugged a Band-Aid and functioned as a Band-Aid linebacker for them, but no more Tay Crowder is going to be a really good thing for them. We already saw that. They let him go late in the season. They benched him like week 9, and their horrible run defense saw significant improvements from that point on. So him no longer being on this team, I had been saying it in this series in years past. Literally, I could not believe he continued to play in New York, and they're saying goodbye to Tay Crowder. Something Giants fans will have a big smile on their face about. And then they, of course, signed Bobby Okereke as well. So it's not just addition by subtraction. They actually bring in a highly paid veteran linebacker from the Colts. And then at cornerback, obvious upgrades here as well. They do say goodbye to Fabian Moreau, who another guy similar to like Jalen Smith, was one of those Band-Aids that came in, found a role, played okay, but they're replacing that big time, bringing in Deonte Banks, who's just a much better version of Fabian Moreau as that press man corner. Really big fan of Deonte Banks. I thought he was a top 10 player in this class. So that alone is an upgrade, but they also bring in Amani Oruwariye and Trey Hawkins, who's getting a lot of camp hype right now, a 6th-round pick out of Old Dominion. Then you go to the safety, and a lot of people will say downgrade here, and I think that's fair, but I'm going to be honest. As I was reviewing Commanders film, I had circled Bobby McCain constantly, and I was like, where did he go? Oh, he went to the Giants. That's a pretty nice pickup. In terms of like longevity and, sustainability with a younger player like Julian Love and letting him leave, you'd probably rather have Julian Love, but getting cheaper there for a similar player in Bobby McCain, who probably was better than Julian Love last year, I'm just going to call that a neutral, but I think it was a pretty savvy move by this Giants front office. If they didn't think Julian Love was a future piece for them, I love getting Bobby McCain as a part-time Band-Aid there. And then kicker punter is going to stay the same. So obviously a very good offseason for the Giants. You can already start to see how this roster is shaping up. But there's a lot of young existing talent that has really filled in and is making this roster look a little bit more NFL caliber as well. We're going to get into the roster in a moment, but first I want to talk about this coaching staff, which I obviously feel extremely positive about. And I felt this way last year. Even though I went through it with Giants fans throughout the year, because in the first 8 weeks of the season, I thought they were an overrated team based on their record, you couldn't come at me too hard because I ranked in last year's series Brian Daboll as the 12th overall head coach in the league before he ever coached a game for the Giants. I really pounded the table that he was the best, most qualified head coach candidate to enter the coach hiring cycle in 5 years. And my God, did that age correctly. I mean, without Brian Daboll here last year, you can make a very strong argument that this team was in the Bryce Young sweepstakes. I mean, I really do feel that way. And I really do feel like he did that good of a job last year with a team that just simply had no business being as good as they were. And now they have much more roster talent. And God, I can't wait to see if, he was able to take a bad roster and make it a good team. Can he make an average roster and make it a great team? And that's where you really start to say, you look at what he did in Buffalo with Josh Allen. You look at a very established coaching background where he learned under Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, Nick Saban at Alabama before he went to Buffalo. I already mentioned, he was super qualified coming in, did such an incredible job last year. if he can take this team and turn them into even a team that wins another playoff game and repeats the job he did last year, I'll be pretty close to viewing Brian Daboll as like an Andy Reid level, Sean Payton level, like top tier head coach. I really think that highly of him, or at least the trajectory that he's heading towards. I mentioned we started him at 12th last year, which was very bold. He's jumping up 3 more spots, where now I rank Brian Daboll as the 9th overall head coach. And a main reason I feel like he can be someone like Andy Reid and Sean Payton is, there's the offensive guru side of things that I'll talk about, but I also think he's just a good CEO type of like leader of a coach. I think he sets the culture at a very high standard. He's learned from Saban and Belichick, like some of the best top-down head coach types in football, and that was he very clearly implemented a tough competitive culture right away. But then you get into his offensive prowess, and that's a big reason I loved this hire. I mean, Josh Allen is not who he is today without Brian Daboll. His ability to scheme up the deep passing game honestly might be at the top of the league, strictly talking about scheming up receivers open in the deep drop back passing game. Like, I think Kyle Shanahan and the play action stuff and the gimmick style offense, if you will, the Shanahan scheme stuff, that's him. I think Andy Reid in terms of West Coast is at the cream of the crop there. But if it's 3rd and 11 and I need someone that's going to correctly drop the right route combinations, make sure the protections are in line, which is something you always feel is very finely tuned in these Brian Daboll offenses. I think Brian Daboll's the guy I'm asking to get me a bucket on 3rd and 11, and obviously that helped Daniel Jones in a big way last season. When it comes to his ability as a run game coach, I think he's excellent as well. Really started to tap into the QB run game late in the Josh Allen days of Daboll's stay there, if you will, and then broke that back out with Daniel Jones last year, where Jones was one of the most effective, efficient running quarterbacks in the league. But even like a lot of the Saquon Barkley Wildcat stuff, this was a top, I think they finished 7th in rushing DVOA last year, and just all around very deliberate efforts to locate what his players are best at and specifically bringing those skill sets out through his play calling. It all just elevated the offense to unbelievable levels, and it was honestly breathtaking. Like, there's not a whole lot of better words to describe how good of a play designer and play caller Brian Daboll was last year. I have the absolute top end respect for him as a pass game coach, where he is inside that top tier of my coach rankings. And then he's in tier 2 for run game coaching, which I think ranks 3rd to 6th. We'll double check that later in the video here. But obviously, Brian Daboll's existence here is the key reason why I have the Giants 13th, while maybe many people look at this roster and say, yeah, that's a little bit high. And I get that. This is not the 13th best roster in the NFL, but that's not the point. Coaching matters last year, and Brian Daboll showed you exactly why. Now, what's cool is I think he's got a really smart, young, ascending mind underneath him. Mike Kafka, who was a backup quarterback in the NFL for a long time, I think he brings his own vision to this offense, and I think he really helped with Daniel Jones too, because if you're a backup quarterback playing in the NFL that long, you want a scheme that can be catered to you, that can really help you play at your best, simplify reads, and, help basically scheme up looks for you to be productive. And I think looking at the game from that lens, it's such a QB friendly mindset to bring to the table. So I don't think Mike Kafka's going to be here very long. I do want to address the Giants fans that I saw throughout the year complaining about Mike Kafka. Respectfully, shut the fuck up. You're crazy. The play calling in New York last year was the best in the league outside of Kansas City and San Francisco. So stop it. They're in very good hands in terms of offensive coaching. And as we switch to the defensive coaching here, I love it, man. Like, would I describe Wink Martindale as a top 10 most brilliant defensive mind? No, I wouldn't. But what I will say is he's a great defensive coach that knows what he wants to run, and he doesn't stay away from that. He wants to blitz. He wants to go zero blitz, put his corners on an island, let them play physical and play aggressive. And if you get beat, you get beat. But they're going to force quarterbacks to make decisions quickly. They're going to make opposing offensive lines feel their presence by ramming into them all day long. And they're going to, put themselves in a spot where they can capitalize on mistakes and turn the ball over. And they really buy into that defensively, and it worked for them really well last year for a roster that, again, it was your Fabian Moreau's and Jalen Smiths and Jihad Wards of the world out there playing. And this was a league average defense last year. Now, there's going to be moments where teams that can handle the blitz or have receivers that can really dominate those one-on-one matchups quickly, you're going to have some weeks where you're left in compromising situations. And that's why the Giants don't rank too high in terms of defensive coaching. They're in that massive middle cluster of what I would just describe as good defensive coaching in my third tier of rankings there. But they're not making any changes here, right? They are going to do the exact same scheme, but with a little bit more firepower this year, which always helps. Training camps are here and football season is just around the corner, but at Underdog Fantasy, you don't have to wait until late August or early September to draft your favorite players and compete for huge cash payouts. In fact, Underdog's Best Ball Mania 4 is the biggest fantasy football competition of all time with, wait for it, $15 million in cash winnings. Best Ball is draft, set it, and forget it. No waivers, no trades. Underdog will retroactively give you your best lineup every week, which means no sitting there on Mondays, making your friends act like they care about which players you left on the bench that week. I've loved filling out my Best Ball teams this summer, and I know you will too. And right now, if you sign up using promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy, not only will you support this channel in a big, big way, but they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. That's 4 free entries into the Best Ball Mania competition or a season's long worth of entries into daily pick'em contests, which are the best way to enjoy NFL games even more with a shot of winning up to 20 times your entry. So that is a match of up to $100 on your first deposit when you sign up right now at Underdog Fantasy. But now let's get into this very interesting roster, some really unique conversations to have here. Let's start with the quarterback room. And after I defended Daniel Jones a little bit in last year's deep dive, he ranked in the mid to high 20s last year. He now finds himself in the teens this year. Daniel Jones, pleasantly surprising for the Giants fans to see him ranked 19th in the NFL. And I was impressed by Daniel Jones's tape last year. I mean, for one, the emergence of him as a running threat to the point where they were able to say, like, all right, we're gonna scheme up the offense. You're gonna be able to survey the field, but if you don't like what you see, just take off and run. It's okay. You're a good threat there. We don't need you to be an elite quarterback. We're not expecting you to be Aaron Rodgers and Joe Burrow and navigate pressure and find your third or fourth read. If we could have a guy that could do that, that'd be great. But we're not gonna force you to be that guy because pocket presence has always been an issue for Daniel Jones. So I think the coaching side of things really elevated his game there. But then we just continued to see like a good decision maker. Maybe not an amazing decision maker, but a good one, up there with like Kirk and Jared Goff and, those kind of quarterbacks where, yeah, there might be a couple plays where he misses a read that the elite quarterbacks would have seen, but he's sure as hell is better than your backup types, right? You know what I'm saying? So like the processing, the decision making, very good. Daniel Jones does have an underrated arm. Again, not a great arm, but a good enough arm to make all of the throws. He can throw with decent accuracy off platform. But I think with all of that said, the most surprising thing that Daniel Jones accomplished last year was how well he took care of the football. You go back a couple years ago and there's a thing on my Twitter. I was like, this week's Daniel Jones turnover of the week brought to you by insert defensive player that forced a fumble or picked him off. That's not him anymore. He's actually now come completely around where he protected the football as good as anybody. And when you're just putting yourself in, like, you want to play close games, you want to, play defense, win late, taking care of the football is key if you want to do that. So you pair all of those things together and you get a good enough quarterback for the Giants to be able to do what they want to do offensively. And that's exactly what we saw last year. And that's why they give him a pretty sizable contract extension. And I don't really have an issue with the money they gave him. I think you're looking at a team that wasn't staring at a high draft pick this season. They weren't going to bring in a rookie to replace Daniel Jones. There's no veteran options this year or in the foreseeable future that were going to be upgrades here. In fact, I think I'd rather roll with Daniel Jones than Derek Carr at this point. Although it's extremely tight. Carr was 20th. And Daniel Jones is 19th. Both get a 77 grade from me. But you know what I'm saying? Like, the Giants are trying to build this thing up. And for the next 2 or 3 years, if Daniel Jones has got to be their quarterback, I think that's very fine. Now, like, there are definite deficiencies here that you need to point out. I mean, he really didn't push the ball downfield a lot. Some of it was, I think, what they told him to do. To just, like we kind of talked about earlier with protecting the football, it was a stylistic choice. But there were times where there's receivers getting open deep, and he's just deciding not to take those chances. And I just have a hard time believing Brian Daboll doesn't want him to pull the trigger on that. I do think Jones has the arm talent to get it there, which is good. But again, the average depth of target was extremely low last year. Ideally, you'd see that come up. And the pocket presence is the main reason Jones does have a lack of upside. He just really, back to his days coming out of Duke, he doesn't have that natural feel in the pocket. He doesn't navigate pressure, find the open spots in the pocket, know kind of when and how to use his feet to extend plays. A lot of people call that the it factor for quarterbacks. Whatever it is, it's lacking for Daniel Jones and doesn't feel like it's ever going to come along. And that's probably the biggest thing that holds his upside back and why you say, yeah, someday they'll probably want to move on from him. My hope, though, is I think at some point they're going to have a conversation like the Rams had where, like, we need a quarterback that can get us over the hump, that can give us more, stretches of high-end play, a guy like a Matthew Stafford, or going in the draft to get a guy, like the Niners thought they were trying to get in Trey Lance, what the Chiefs did going after Mahomes, that kind of a move where you're moving up to get a guy. I think that might be in play down the road for the Giants, but you weren't going to let Daniel Jones leave, right? You would just set back everything they accomplished last year, and I think they're going to be just fine there at quarterback this year, again ranking 19th. Also love having Tyrod in there as a backup. He's very familiar with Brian Daboll's offense at this point. You can do a lot of the QB run stuff that they do with Daniel Jones. And if Jones misses a couple games, I think with what we saw from the play calling last year, they can still win football games with Tyrod Taylor in there. So very, very good backup. But now let's talk about the weapons. And they do rank 29th there. It's not a great room, but it is a hell of a lot better than it was last year. I think you look at what the Giants were working with last year, and it was as bad as anybody had. And they were having to throw to your Kenny Gallaudays and Marcus Johnstons and David Sills. And they were like, no, let's make sure we at least always have a starting caliber NFL wide receiver on the field. And they just brought in as many as they could find. Now, the other difference here is I think you've got to look at Isaiah Hodgins' second half breakout in a way being like an addition to this team, because he was a guy that they found that they needed. And that was a huge turning point in me starting to view this offense as much more legit, was when they found him in the second half of the year. So getting him now from start to finish is huge. So for those reasons, I do think this room is better, even though long-term they're going to have to continue to find the right pieces. But let's take a look at these guys on a more individual basis and what we can expect from them this year. So Darius Slayton, really nice bounce back year last year. He actually earned a contract extension here with the Giants, although it wasn't a ton, and the market obviously wasn't that high on Darius Slayton. And I think the Giants long-term are hoping to kind of get a more secure vertical threat into this offense, and they're hoping Jalen Hyatt can be that guy. So let's talk about Hyatt along with Slayton here. I think they see both of these guys as a Z deep threat wide receiver, sort of that flanker. And in this offense, that's a super dangerous role because Brian Daboll is really creative with motion and formations to get guys with speed into space. And that was like a knock on Jalen Hyatt coming out. It's been a knock on Darius Slayton, is like, can he play physical throughout the route? Can he beat press coverage? Well, in an offense like this that loves deep crossing routes, is not afraid to, get guys open on a go ball, both Slayton and Hyatt are in perfect spots where they can utilize their skill sets as a deep presence for the offense. Now, with Slayton, the drops and the inability to win contested catches continued to be a part of his game, even though he had a good year last year. And that's why they're going, they're hoping Hyatt can, in time, overtake Slayton, because Hyatt didn't have drop issues. He's not a contested catch guy, but he can track the deep ball, and he's much more reliable there. So, to me, those two guys are going to kind of rotate with each other for the most part. I think Hyatt will eat into Slayton's production a little bit, and I think there will be weeks where Hyatt catches a 60-yard touchdown and we get excited about him. But I also don't think Hyatt's going to get a ton of snaps, at least early on, unless he really starts to ball out, which I'm not going to say is impossible. But, I don't think he's going to come out there against Dallas week 1 getting, 30 snaps and a bunch of deep targets. It's probably going to start more on that almost like Anthony Schwartz trajectory where he's coming in for like 3 or 4 snaps. Maybe they'll scheme him up deep as a first read or an alert for Daniel Jones, and if it's there, pull the trigger, and then they're going to look to build it from there. So I'm not necessarily buying into like big fantasy football year 1 hype on Jalen Hyatt, but long-term inside this offense, I do love the fit there. And because of that fit, I think Darius Slayton will continue to play pretty well as the starter in that role. And then you've got Isaiah Hodgins, who we alluded to earlier, but man, I freaking love Isaiah Hodgins, man. I was so happy to see him break out selfishly because I had like a day 2 grade on Isaiah Hodgins coming out of Oregon State. I compared him to Adam Thielen. I was so convinced, like, this guy has the best hands in the draft. I even tweeted that back then. So to see him go in the 6th round, stashed in Buffalo, I was like, man, I really thought I liked what I saw from the film. But to see the second he gets that opportunity, really, he showed off the same traits, which is good route running for a big guy. And again, incredible hands, whether that's contested catch opportunities where he can track the ball, fight through traffic, but also just wicked secure hands. Didn't have a single drop last season. This guy is legit. And again, his emergence in the second half of last year is really when, in my mental, I started to see this Giants offense as much more consistent because they had a guy that was reliable in the receiving game. And even Darius Slayton wasn't necessarily reliable, though Slayton's a little bit more explosive. So to me, Hodgins is going to line up as their X wide receiver pretty much every snap. I don't see a lot of other big-bodied guys, unless Colin Johnson makes this team, that are going to really steal a lot of snaps, steal a lot of targets from Isaiah Hodgins. And I'd be pretty surprised if he's not the leading receiver for this offense. They can put him into the slot, and they will in certain times as that kind of big slot, but with Darren Waller here now to do that, they like doing that with Lawrence Cager a little bit, and like all these other receivers that we're about to talk about are also slot types. I really think Isaiah Hodgins is just their starting X. And I think he could be, at his best, something extremely similar to how we talk about with maybe Juju Smith-Schuster or even like Michael Pittman for the Colts. So I got the arrow pointing up on him, and he's one of my favorite players in the league because he was one of my favorite draft crushes way back when, and it's just fun to see that hit. Then it's like the same conversation with all the rest of these guys. Seriously, Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, they're all slot receivers. So This is where I think they're saying, all right, Shepard's got injury problems. Wandale's coming in off the pup. Paris can never stay healthy. Jamison Crowder's been trending down lately. Cole Beasley's been trending down. They look at the role that Richie James played for them, where there were weeks where Richie James was their best option as that short to intermediate separator, a guy that can scheme up looks for, provide a little bit of rack. They look at all these guys and say, we just want to make sure we can have that guy every week, no matter who it is. And with those more veteran types, honestly, I think it's pretty inconsequential in terms of who makes the team, how much they're playing. It just kind of raises the floor of who that slot wide receiver is with Beasley, Shepard, and Crowder. So, we'll wait and see kind of like who makes the team. The NFL is going to kind of wait and see who makes the team here because especially with Shepard and Crowder, I think there are wide receiver rooms that could use one of those two guys as a wide receiver 4 or 5. And I just don't think all these guys can make it. And actually right now, Cole Beasley is running ahead of Jamison Crowder, which is very interesting. But they do have a little bit more upside in terms of slot play with both Campbell and Wandale Robinson. And with Robinson still trying to come back off the pup, from that midseason injury, they're not entirely sure what they're going to get from him, which is definitely unfortunate because, in that Richie James role, it was kind of originally the Wandale Robinson role where he actually looked really legitimately explosive as that second round rookie. I was stunned how early they took him, but Dable in this offense has always had that role for that undersized receiver that he's going to scheme him into space and utilize that quick twitch athleticism. He did it for years with Isaiah McKenzie. Did it with Richie James last year, and just before he got hurt, Wandale Robinson looked legitimately good in that role. So they're hoping, they can get things back rolling with Wandale, but in the meantime, Paris Campbell can totally do that kind of stuff. He's like Kirkland brand diet Deebo Samuel, where he's kind of built like a running back. He can generate a lot of yards after the catch, adequate route running, adequate hands, nothing special there. The thing with Campbell is he's never been able to stay healthy, and he did for the most part last year. He got a decent contract here for the Giants, and again, I think he can exist as a serviceable weapon here and provide a little bit more of that floor that they're looking for. But they, again, are hoping long-term Wandale can be that key slot piece. And then you look like deep down the road and you say, okay, Hodgins can be an X for us, Wandale can be a gadget player, Hyatt can be that deep threat, and then maybe at some point the opportunity presents itself to go trade for that number one, like an A.J. Brown becomes available, a DJ Moore, not those players specifically, but that realm of opportunity to go get that true alpha. As far as any other receivers that we didn't really talk about yet, I mentioned Colin Johnson briefly. He deserves a little bit more time. He was starting to play decent before the injury last year, before the year even got started. And I think his opportunity has kind of come and gone, unfortunately. It's just the reality of professional sports. Excuse me, sometimes injuries just derail everything. And Isaiah Hodgins got the opportunity and never really looked back at this point in time. Johnson is, though, another guy that it's going to be tough for them to cut him because he's got the size. So we'll have to see kind of how that plays out. But if he gets cut, I would imagine he's going to be pretty high up on a lot of people's waiver wire priority lists. And then, Bryce Ford Wheaton as well. I don't think this team's going to want to put him on the practice squad because they did pay him good money for a priority free agent. And I imagine somebody will say, we'll stash Bryce Ford Wheaton as our 6th or 7th wide receiver. So it's going to be a really interesting wide receiver room to see how this plays out. At max, they could keep 8 of these guys if they got really creative with the rest of the roster. But, keeping 7 is becoming more common, but has been pretty rare throughout the course of the NFL. So definitely a fascinating room that I think will provide better wide receiver play than they got last year quite easily. Now, tight end, you're definitely expecting better tight end play than last year. And going to get Darren Waller obviously has generated a lot of excitement, and I get it, man. Waller's a freak, 6'6" wide receiver, converted tight end. He's had some outstanding, kind of Pro Bowl type seasons for the Raiders. It's just been health with him. That's why he was available from the Raiders. There's not really any huge questions about how good he is when he's on the field, though he hasn't been that dominant guy over the last 2 years when he's been on the field. It's been more flashes as opposed to consistent dominance, whether that's being a focal point of the offense, coming down with contested catches like he did earlier in his career. He was at 73% contested catch win rate in 2020. He's been down into the 40s the last 2 years, so you would love to get that big-bodied ball winner back. He's only 31 years old, so it's not crazy to think that's impossible. Reports are he's been just lighting up camp, and I do think Dable has shown that he can scheme up good athletes. I mean, he helped Dawson Knox become a highly paid tight end who's a very just rudimentary, raw athlete at the tight end position. Even Daniel Bellinger stepped in and showed some flashes last year. Waller's just on a different playing field than those guys. So definitely excited to see what he can do here. I wouldn't be stunned if Waller kind of reemerged as a top 3 tight end. I don't think he is anymore. But the potential, I would say, is still there. It really just does come down to health, where you almost expect him to miss some games, and it's going to be kind of wait and see there. But still love giving up a third-round pick for a team that doesn't really have that difference maker. Waller can be a difference maker. But in the weeks that Waller does go down, because that, again, just feels kind of inevitable, I do think Daniel Bellinger will continue to develop. I loved the pick of Daniel Bellinger. I even compared him to Dawson Knox coming out, where he was a good athlete, underutilized in the receiving game, but a good blocker. No reason that NFL coaching couldn't get more out of him. And I think we started to see that as the year went on. And you don't want to have to count on that, where it's just promise at this point in time. But as a backup to Darren Waller, as a little bit of a better blocker, they can get into 12 personnel and kind of get into a little bit more mismatch type of offense, where you can go no huddle, and Waller can be an inline 12 personnel guy. He can flex out wide as a wide receiver if you want him. Like, that's going to provide a lot of schematic flexibility for Dable to get a little bit more creative. And I still think Bellinger is going to be kind of a headache for opposing defenses, where he can develop his game behind Darren Waller and go from last year. It was like Bellinger went down for an injury, and it was like, oh God, who else are they going to throw to? Now it's like, yeah, I mean, he can just get lost and work on his game, and maybe a couple of years down the road, we're talking about him as a starting tight end. They also have Lawrence Cager, he converted wide receiver turned tight end. He's going to make this team kind of buried down the depth chart, but he caught the ball when they threw it his way. They also add Tommy Sweeney, low-level tight end depth. Not even sure he'll make it, because I think they got to keep a lot of wide receivers in here. And then you have, I would say, top 3 impact from the running back in Saquon Barkley in the receiving game. I would go Eckler and McCaffrey ahead of him, and then Saquon. It's definitely a little frustrating that he hasn't been able to clean up his hands. He's had 6 drops in each of the last 2 years, and that's kind of lagged his receiving production behind a little bit from where I think it could be. Not only are you leaving yards on the table when you drop the ball, but I think it's been just, when you see your running back do that, you're not necessarily going to go back to the film room throughout the week and drop a bunch of plays for him. That's been the missing piece there, but God, the second he gets the ball in his hand, and even some of the times I think he does drop the ball because he likes to, turn his head upfield and get ready to make guys miss, where he's just so dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's a good route runner. I'm kind of optimistic that this is the year he's going to clean up those hands a little bit and be a true difference maker and maybe a little bit more of a focal point of the passing game. As far as the rest of your options with the running backs are concerned, Matt Breida is a good athlete, can be a decent option there. Eric Gray was really good catching the ball to the backfield at Oklahoma, so you're optimistic that he might be able to get involved with some third down work if need be. Robinson, Brightwell, a little bit more limited laterally speaking with their athleticism, but decent hands, decent screen threats. And that rounds out a wild, deep group of weaponry. Obviously not very top-heavy, not overly explosive, but they got a million different skill sets now. Much better overall talent pool for one of the most brilliant offensive play designers, and just guys that has proven now that he can locate a guy's specific skill set and get the most out of that skill set and use it at a really, really good level. So I'm kind of in a weird, twisted way excited to see this group and what Daboll's going to do with it. And if last year's group was something they were able to work around, this is going to be a luxury for them, even though they've got work to do heading into the future. So again, 19th at quarterback, 29th at weapons. They do rank, though, 6th at running back in the NFL. Sounds low, I know. Got to remember, I'm super high on Bijan. I think Bijan's going to step in and be an even better back than Saquon. But 6th is still awesome here for the Giants. It is a bummer that Saquon didn't get his money because, I do think he is a difference-making running back. We saw that last year. I don't feel like the Giants are in a spot where paying him was going to cripple the state of the organization. If he was able to play at like an elevated franchise tag at like $11.6 million, you really can't pay Saquon 3 years, 45. Maybe he didn't want to take that deal, but I don't know. It's just a mess, but that's a different conversation for a different time. Saquon's a huge part of this offense, and I mentioned earlier they were, I think, 7th in overall rushing DVOA. They don't sniff that without Saquon Barkley because he provides explosiveness, home run hitting ability, that ability to make a defender miss. You can give the ball to him on a tough 3rd and 3, and he's going to find a way to pick it up. And he's got enough size and juice in his lower half to run with power at times. He's got that insane jump cut, the springiness to change lanes and make guys miss. I mean, how can you not love Saquon Barkley? So he's obviously going to be the large makeup of this 6th ranked running back room. Really hope he can stay healthy. I think that is a big reason the Giants didn't necessarily want to commit to him long term. It's been a couple years before this year that he's been able to stay healthy, but fingers crossed on that, I suppose. The backup room is fairly deep, though. Nobody I'm really, this was another reason why it's like, I'm really glad they were able to at least work out Saquon for this year, and why I'd probably pay him long term is because, some running back rooms, you let your star go and you've got a good replacement plan. The Giants don't really have a plan B for Barkley. They've brought in a couple different bodies like Eric Gray and James Robinson, but these guys they're Jags. They're just a guys at the running back position. Matt Breida's that kind of straight line speedster. Played pretty well last year. They get him in opportunities where they're going to create large run lanes for him, whether that's wide zone or running a draw with him or running out of shotgun on maybe 2nd and long where the boxes start to lighten up. And it's a good way to use him. He can hit a hole hard. He's got some speed. Eric Gray is kind of the opposite. He's much more of a creative running style where he's got that contact balance. He's got a jump cut that he likes to go to. Not overly explosive, though. It's why he fell to the 5th round. But if anything happens to Barkley, you've got a little bit of a, complementary skill set between your backs, where if you want to go wide zone or some of those later down runs that I described, Matt Breida. If you want to go inside zone, you can go to Eric Gray, where he's got good vision and creativity in those types of runs. And then if you want more of a downhill runner with some power, you got both Gary Brightwell and James Robinson. Brightwell is a good one-cut runner on power, on duo. And then James Robinson, in theory, is a really good inside zone runner, but he really just has not looked the same. The Patriots let him go. That's not a great sign. He's a guy that had a huge workload in college. He had like 1,000 carries before he got to the NFL. Jacksonville kind of rode him into the ground. And it does seem like he's kind of lost a half a step. And his sort of acceleration into the hole was always one of his best traits. So if he's lost that, again, he's a Jag, just a guy. I do hope he can get some of that explosiveness back, though, because talk about running backs getting screwed out of money. I mean, yeah, Saquon deserves more money, but Saquon's been paid really well relative to the running backs in the NFL. Robinson entered the league as an undrafted pickup and has made like $3 million? Not that that's not great, but for what he's produced, that's pretty bad. So, I would love to see him at least stick around NFL rosters and make a vet min for a couple more years because he at least deserves that. But anyway, The running backs, the run game, very good here. Thanks to Saquon Barkley, but also thanks to Daniel Jones. And it's funny to say that, but it's true. I mean, he gets the 6th ranked QB run multiplier here. Daniel Jones had 805 rushing yards last year, and the designed QB run game was a legitimate problem for opposing teams. I mean, Vanilla Vic here, right? It's a real thing, and it's not just the numbers advantage that those play calls bring to the table by reading a defensive end or just adding an extra blocker on QB power, QB sweep, all of it. But Jones himself has like legit acceleration, legit juice, legit speed. We all remember the long run where he tripped over himself, but had hit like some of the best top speed in the league that year. Like he can legit run. And I love that Brian Daboll has tapped into that. It's yet another reminder that he's so good at locating his player skill sets and getting the most out of it. And that was a legit booster to this offense in a big way. Again, I just want to reiterate, this team was 7th in the NFL in rushing DVOA. They had the 10th offense in terms of efficiency last year. They don't sniff that without the threat of the QB run game. So it's a real thing there. And Tyrod Taylor, by the way, the backup, can allow you to keep doing basically the same thing if Jones does go down for any amount of time, really. But now let's take a look at the offensive line. And it's another group that, kind of like the receiving room, they're still trying to figure this thing out in real time, but it is a group that I think is better than it was last year. They're going to rank as the 25th overall offensive line and pretty much the same in pass blocking as they are in run blocking, 24th in pass blocking, 26th in run blocking. So it's not a special group, but from left to right, you got Andrew Thomas, who at some point will be the best left tackle in the NFL. I feel pretty confident saying that. Trent Williams at some point won't be able to just be the Terminator every snap. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but after Trent Williams, you can start to talk about Andrew Thomas as the best tackle in the NFL. I mean, I think Tunsil, Bakhtiari, Thomas, Ronnie Stanley, if he can get healthy, probably forgetting some other names, but seriously, this dude is a machine in his own right. And the growth he made from his rookie year into his second year and then into his third year, like, we don't even necessarily know when this stops. I mean, he has gotten better every year. There's not a whole lot better for him to get, though, because his technique is just, it's textbook. His explosiveness out of his stance, his hand placement, his balance, his core balance. It's all been the perfect marriage of what were really good physical tools, if not elite physical tools coming out of Georgia. And it took a year after they drafted him for it to prove out that they made the right decision in taking Andrew Thomas over guys like Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, Jedrick Wills. Those guys all had better rookie years than Andrew Thomas, but the Giants aren't looking back. I mean, even Tristan Wirfs, it's hard to say you'd take him over Andrew Thomas with what he did last year. And Thomas is a great run blocker too. That's another thing I felt was underrated about him coming out, and that's proved out in his pro career. I mentioned the athleticism is really good, but he gets easy leverage. He plays with good pad level. The hand usage is very natural for him. I would say he's an elite pass protector and a superstar run blocker. Ultimately, having him allows you to relax. It allows you to slide your protections away from him because you can trust him to hold up against so many different pass rushers. And it allows you to just kind of lock it in, set it, forget it, and focus on developing the rest of these guys. Like trying to find a left guard. So Ben Bredesen right now is listed as their left guard. They also drafted Josh Ezeudu in the 3rd round last year. And I think when you look at Thomas's development here and what they're going to need to do to develop Evan Neal in year 2, I don't think you can just dismiss the idea that Josh Ezeudu could eventually become a starting guard here. But let's talk about the guys listed as starters here for now. Bredesen is the definition of a replacement level guy. He's an average athlete, been in the league for a couple years, and he's developed to the point that he can play a little bit. Feels like a perpetual reminder of like, if it's day 3 of the draft and you don't know who to take, just grab a Michigan or a Notre Dame offensive lineman, because eventually they're going to turn into at least Ben Bredesen, and that's kind of what's happened. He's their weak link right now. He's their Band-Aid option. I guess he's having a good camp. I'll see it when I believe it. I think you can survive with him as your weakest link if everybody else plays well. But ultimately, eventually, you're going to want something better, and that's when Ezeudu is going to come into the picture. But let's keep going through the starters. John Michael Schmitz at center. What's not to say, man? He never should have been there late in the second round. They can thank their New York brethren in the Jets for taking the quote-unquote upside of Tippmann. They can thank a team like the Bucks for taking Cody Mock ahead of him. I could obviously be wrong about that take, but John Michael Schmitz is just such a better player, man. This does certainly have vibes of when Creed Humphrey fell to the Chiefs, and I'm not going to say he can't be Creed Humphrey, but that's obviously a pretty big outlier and a pretty big stretch, and Creed was a little bit wider, a little bit more athletic, so maybe you're more talking about John Michael Schmitz being, let's just say, what Dable had in Buffalo in Mitch Morse. But to get that in the second round is still a steal and is going to be a massive upgrade from what this team had at center last year. It sounds like he's already locked in the starting center job. Not a surprise there. I mean, he's a 24-year-old rookie who really for the last 4 years at Minnesota has been one of the best overall offensive linemen in all of college football. So was really surprised he went as late as he did. If they took him in the first round, I would not have batted an eye. He filled a huge need. Honestly, he's part of the reason I'm a little higher on this Giants team. I really think he's that good. And then you got Mark Glowinski at right guard, at least for now. They're actually flirting with maybe a Bredesen and Ezeudu combo at guard. So I've heard. I still believe ultimately Glowinski will end up the starting right guard. I still think he's a capable guard, but I understand it. Like he wasn't quite what they paid for in terms of pass protection. He's still a very good run blocker, but he's not a long-term answer for them, and they're hoping maybe Ezeudu can be. If Bredesen's playing well, I'm not really going to question this coaching staff with the guards. But yeah, I think Glowinski is a good option. If nothing else, he's a great backup to have. But I do think he wins the job, and he's just kind of a nice, adequate starter, better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. Not someone I'm worried about, but definitely someone, like the Giants have shown, are looking for long-term replacements. But the ultimate question here lies at right tackle with Evan Neal, where it's always possible for tackles to come out and struggle a little bit more than you expect. And I loved the Evan Neal pick. I really did. I think I gave it like an S or an A+ or whatever. I thought it was a slam dunk pick. And I still think it can be. I mean, look what happened with Andrew Thomas. But his tape definitely revealed some real issues, Evan Neal. And we always talk about some guys just do struggle moving from left to right. I really felt like his explosiveness out of his stance, his feet, and just his overall ability to move looked a lot worse, honestly, than it did at Alabama. Like, I genuinely feel like if I saw what he looked like at right tackle for the Giants on his Alabama tape, I would not have been as high on him. So the hope is they can continue to refine his technique. Maybe he can get more comfortable on the right side. Maybe that is a legitimate thing for him. It's not a guarantee that he develops, but I am pretty optimistic. I feel like he's a really high character guy. There aren't athletic limitations for Evan Neal. He's just a little bit disjointed right now in his technique, and that really starts with his feet, but goes all the way up to his hand placement and all of that. So development is still needed for Evan Neal. He was an issue for them last year. He really was, and he's gonna have to be better, or it honestly could have a significant impact on this team's ability to make the playoffs again. You also want to see some growth as a run blocker from Evan Neal. I think just his overall discomfort showed across the board. You could still see him connect on some run blocks where he is just so physically strong, and when he gets his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. He's just got to learn how to get his hands on you more consistently. So again, I'm still optimistic on Evan Neal, but I'd be blind to tell you I watched the film and that I'm overly excited for what he showed. So we'll see. He's a giant wild card for this team season, honestly. As far as the depth is concerned, the first guy I want to talk about is Josh Ezeudu, who again just might be starting. I will acknowledge that they're entertaining that, and I think that's probably more of a positive sign that Bredesen and Ezeudu are developing well than it is that they just absolutely hate Mark Glowinski. And especially with Josh Ezeudu, that'd be very optimistic. I mean, I didn't hate that pick when they made him. I made it in the third round. I think he's an athletic guy, had really good tape out of North Carolina. If my memory serves me right, he had played some tackle, so he kind of slid back inside to guard, and he's just kind of like Evan Neal, learning the techniques of the trade at that position. That said, it was not pretty when he played last year as a rookie. Definitely looked like a late round rookie that was plugged in and couldn't really hang. So we haven't seen good tape from him at the NFL level, but I do know the traits are there, and I wouldn't be stunned if he develops. So we'll keep an eye on him. I do think there's reason to believe that he could still work out here. Most linemen aren't plug-and-play starters as rookies. It's just the reality of the position. So you don't want to give up on these guys too quick. But the rest of the depth, at tackle, I think Tyree Phillips is adequate depth by NFL standards. Nothing special, but they survived with him out there. I guess that's the nicest thing I can say about Tyree Phillips. Matt Parrott, he is a guy that was a draft crush of mine that didn't really work out here. I think he just is lacking a little bit of that it factor to develop. He's a really athletic guy. He looks the part as an NFL offensive tackle, but the consistency has just been all over the map. He's got okay technique, and as a backup has had some decent starts and shown signs of promise, but I don't know how many people are really holding out hope for Matt Peart at this point, myself included. You're going to have a couple other people competing for interior offensive line depth beyond Ezeudu. So Shane Lemieux, who has started some games for this team and been a complete turnstile in pass protection. Sean Harlow, who's been a bit of a journeyman veteran, if not a career backup for one team, but I think he's bounced around a little bit. Jack Anderson played some games last year. He's a high floor, low ceiling backup type. Wyatt Davis, kind of the opposite, as a guy with a lot of tools that hasn't grown a lick since he came out of the league as a third-round pick for the Vikings. So no one I'm overly interested in beyond Ezeudu in terms of interior depth. And honestly, they're lacking in that department. You're really counting on growth from a guy like Ezeudu if anybody goes down. Otherwise, this thing could fall off the rails pretty quickly here. Certainly not an injury-proof offensive line. I'll leave it at that. They do have some useful skill blockers. Daniel Bellinger, Chris Myrick, and Isaiah Hodgins all get pretty nasty in the run game, giving them a slight boost in the run blocking. But again, 25th in overall offensive line, 24th in pass protection, and 26th in run blocking, which rounds out this offense, and they rank 16th, dead middle offensively. They are going to come in 5th in the run game. Again, they were 7th last year. It's not always copy and paste, but you look at the multiplier they get from the quarterback. You look at having a great running back like Saquon. I think the run blocking is a little bit better than they had last year, adding John Michael Schmitz into the mix. You pair that with Brian Daboll's coaching, there's no reason to believe that this can't be a complete pain in the ass of a run game to deal with, even if the run blocking isn't insane. And then the passing game's a little bit more polarizing. The coaching does a lot of the heavy lifting, just like we saw last year. They were 10th in pass game DVOA last year, so this is a pretty big drop in that department. I still think the receiving talent and the pass blocking, it is lacking to project them to be a top 10 passing team by DVOA again. But 19th, still showing a lot of respect to obviously what Brian Daboll accomplished last year, for Daniel Jones's growth. And I don't know if their ceiling is that much higher than 19th, but I do think this is an underrated offense as a whole just because of the Brian Daboll factor. And I think they're in a much better spot to be more consistent than they were last year as well. But let's turn over to the defense, which is a really good group in their own right. And let's start with the defensive line that I think this group also would be a key reason why I come off a little bit higher on the Giants. And dude, that starts with Dexter Lawrence. He was insane. What he did to the Minnesota Vikings, especially in that playoff game, should be illegal in all 50 states. Like, he should probably be arrested like the other New York defensive tackle was at the airport a couple years ago. It was a murdering in US Bank Stadium. But the signs were there that he's capable of that. And my take on Dexter Lawrence in the draft might be one of my worst draft takes ever. I did not see this type of upside for Dexter Lawrence, where now, like, I think he's an elite defensive tackle. I could have seen him becoming an elite run defender like he is as this dominant nose tackle. But for his athleticism to come through as a pass rusher in the way that it has, it's special. And in a league where teams are living in nickel, and the Giants aren't different in that regard, to have a nose tackle that can genuinely two-gap while also being a three-down player and a pass rusher, and not just two-gap, like dominate double teams, it's remarkably valuable across the entire defense for the Giants. And I really think he's underrated in a lot of ways. He didn't just take over that Vikings game. There were multiple games throughout the year where he was decimating offensive lines blocking schemes in both phases. So he's hitting his prime. And again, a big reason why this Giants team has honestly probably become a little underrated. And then he's got the perfect Robin to his Batman in Leonard Williams, who for a while was kind of, a little overrated, a little bit overpaid. You look at it now, though, now that Dexter's broken out and the D-tackle market has caught up a little bit, you're pretty damn happy with where you are with Leonard Williams, where he can focus on being kind of more of a three-tech. He's not going to see a lot of double teams because Lawrence is going to get those. And as that three technique, he can focus on one gap. He can beat his man. He's a very good pass rusher and a good run defender. He can even line up and play the edge at times if you need him. And there's going to be times where they can do that because they also brought in A'Shawn Robinson, who we'll talk about. So if Ojulari's not available one week because he's got health concerns, Leonard Williams can play 5-tech as a quasi-edge, and you can slide in A'Shawn Robinson and provide some added depth and flexibility there. So it's kind of the perfect, not kind of, it is literally the perfect complement of skill sets between two interior defensive linemen there, with kind of your more quick, undersized DN/3-tech type and a true nose tackle like Dexter Lawrence. But let's bounce out to the edge rushers and the rest of the starters here before we break down the depth. And that means we get to talk about Kayvon Thibodeaux, which is an exciting conversation. I mean, a little bit of a slow start because, well, he's a rookie, but he was also coming off an injury to start his season. But from the second he got out there, he fit that narrative that myself and many were saying in the draft, that the idea that Trayvon Walker is going to go ahead of Thibodeaux as the number one pick, and the idea that Thibodeaux didn't love football and had all these character concerns was just one of the most complete bullshit, fabricated, NFL overthought this thing stories in a while. I mean, I still believe the number one pick, I said it time and time again, should have been either Kayvon Thibodeaux or Garrett Wilson. And so far, it's looking pretty good. We'll see, though. I mean, it's going to be fun to see how this edge class works out between Walker and Thibodeaux and Hutchinson, who I think went to the right spot, definitely in Detroit. I think Thibodeaux went to the right spot with New York, because if the idea is if he falls in the draft because, he doesn't care about football, all he cares about is brand. I always said, like, coming out of the draft, like, you know what helps your brand? Being really good at football for the New York Giants. So I really think the arrow is trending way up on Kayvon Thibodeaux, and his traits are why I thought it was stupid that Trayvon Walker would go ahead of him, because it's like they acted like Kayvon Thibodeau wasn't super traitsy and Khalil Mack-esque in terms of his build and his length and his raw power. Thibodeau's got the speed, he's got bend, he's an absurd athlete at the position. And if he can continue to refine his pass rush package, continue to develop, the sky is the limit for Kayvon Thibodeau. And I'm just excited to see what he can become. He already was a good rusher as a rookie. And even if he doesn't develop and he's just this really athletic guy, that his athleticism's a handful and he's a ball of energy and a good run defender, which another just bullshit narrative was that he doesn't want to defend the run. It's very clear that he wants to and will defend the run at the NFL level. Like, he is an energetic spark plug out there, if anything else. Certainly not a guy that lacks energy. I just, so stupid, some of these draft narratives. But and anyway, if he's just who he was last year as a rookie, that's a good starting edge rusher. But if he can reach his upside, maybe not all the way up to like Khalil Mack, but if he can be a low-end number one, someone like a Trey Hendrickson or a Daniil Hunter maybe would be a good, realistic upside hope for him. You plug him in there with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, and this goes from right now where it is as the 13th best pass rush to a holy shit game-wrecking top 3 to 5 pass rush, something that reminds you of those great Giants pass rushes that won this team Super Bowl. So So really excited to see what Thibodeau's growth this year and beyond is going to look like. Then you got Azeez Ojulari opposite of him. Got to stay healthy. Everybody knows that's his biggest problem. Not that he's been overly explosive or efficient as a pass rusher, but he's definitely shown enough in the first 2 years of his career while battling injuries that he can be, as a fourth piece next to Thibodeau and Williams and Lawrence, you don't need him to become anything super special. But if he can become like a Preston Smith, a Randy Gregory, like that kind of guy who can still get you 40 pressures, 8 sacks, cleanup work, he can totally handle that. Just has to stay healthy. He is the worst run defender out of this group. He is a little bit smaller, and I don't know that that's ever going to be a strength. So it's worth noting it's not going to destroy their D-line run defense grade or anything like that, because they do rank 4th in D-line run defense to complement the 13th best pass rush in the NFL. Needless to say, though, this is a really fun group that I think is just starting to make a name for themselves, and that might be leading to them being a little bit underrated right now. They really already showed with Dexter Lawrence in there they can be a group that dominates football games. As far as the depth is concerned, they got some pieces. I mentioned A'Shawn Robinson. I like that pickup. He's got to get healthy. It's going to be a question mark, but this team did really struggle against the run last year, though I don't think it was the fault of the defensive linemen. But the depth for D-line certainly wasn't as good as it is now with Robinson and Roches. So you can bring in Robinson as a relief pitcher for Leonard Williams on early downs. You can also get into some more 3-man interior fronts, a little bit more good base 3-4. It's not that they won't run base 3-4, but it's more rare nowadays. Very solid pickup. And then I also like Rakeem Nunez-Roches, who was underrated for the Tampa Bay Bucks for the last couple of years. Definitely got overshadowed by guys like Shaq Barrett and, Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, William Golston, a lot of names on that D-line. But, Nunez-Roches did a lot of dirty work and played really well last year. So that was another sneaky good pickup by this Giants front office to really round out the depth for the interior group. And I think that's going to help really get this run defense to where they want it to be. The rest of these guys are, roster fillers and prospects. Ryder Anderson, an undersized piece who played some DN for them last year. DJ Davidson was a bigger body draft pick that I didn't mind. I would like to see him get into the mix a little bit more this year. Jordan Riley as well. They're looking for backup nose tackle types that can eat up run snaps between Riley and Davidson, but neither of them are established yet, and A'Shawn Robinson can do that until they see what they have in Davidson and Riley. And they got some other names in there competing, but I think those are the main 5 in the mix. And then on the edge, it's great to hopefully have Azeez Ojulari healthy, because Jihad Ward and O'Shane Ximenez had to start basically between the two of them last year. And now they're, your third and fourth edge pieces, rotational depth. As rotational pieces, they're good players, two very similar guys. Ximenez and Ward, very big-bodied, physical guys, not the most physically gifted players. And Jihad Ward's got to be 32 at this point. He's been in the league for so long. But as snap eaters and capable rotational depth, absolutely. Tolman Fox as well had to play a good amount of snaps last year. He might not even make the team now if Ojulari's healthy. Tayshawn Bauer, okay, whatever. But I do want to put the eyes on Habaduk Baldonado. Big fan of him. I'm biased because I'm Italian, and Baldonado is a Roman-born guy that is kind of new to highly competitive football. He came over to begin his high-level football career, if you will, at Pitt. I think he had 1 year in a prep high school, but he did start playing football in Rome. He would drive himself to practice as soon as he was able to drive in Italy. A unique player. He's got light feet. He used to play soccer. And I'm really curious, what NFL coaching can do for him. He was good at Pitt. I really thought he should have been drafted 5th round pretty easily. So for them to pick him up as an undrafted pickup in a room that, I think he can beat out Bauer and Fox and maybe get out there. Definitely someone to keep an eye on. I like that pick, or undrafted pickup, really. That wraps up the D-line. They rank 13th in overall pass rush, a really good group in a league filled with super talented pass rushes, and then 4th in D-line run defense. I think this group is really going to impress a lot of people with how stout they are up front. But let's talk about the linebackers, or rather linebacker for the Giants. It's a very polarizing group. They bring in Bobby Okereke. It was a good, veteran free agent signing. And then they have a complete unproven year 2 linebacker in Micah McFadden, who we can only hope will be okay. Now, I still think Micah McFadden, I think you or me or our grandmas would be better than what they had in Tay Crowder last year. So at least there's that. But yeah, you have a proven vet who they're paying a good amount of money to come in here, and Bobby Okereke, who's very balanced and very good across the board, and then a complete unknown beyond that. As far as Okereke is concerned, though, I do like the signing. I think this was necessary. It really is remarkable that the Giants were 32nd in defensive DVOA last year, at least in run defense, despite having Dexter Lawrence up front. Now, I checked from week 9 on, when they benched Tay Crowder for literally anybody else, they jumped up to 24th. So things got better. But it's not like, Tay Crowder was playing for a reason. It's because they didn't have a lot of options. Now they have a legit starter in there in Bobby Okereke, who's a really smart, full-size linebacker, a Stanford guy. Now gets a chance to really shine. He got a chance to kind of shine last year when Darius Leonard was unavailable for the Colts, and he had a career year in run defense, continued to be a good coverage player. There's really nothing bad to say about Bobby Okereke. It was a necessary signing, was a good contract that he got, and I expect him to play up to it. As far as Micah McFadden is concerned, he is a 5th-round guy in year 2. I think there's traits there. He's an athletic guy. He's a great blitzer. I think they could really tap into him more there. He was a secure tackler in his rookie year when he started to get some more playing time, had some flash plays. There's no reason he couldn't develop. It's just, he needs to really speed up his keys, be in the right place, find that right balance of aggressiveness and conservative approach as a linebacker. Also just really doesn't know what he's looking at yet in coverage, in large part because all he did in college was blitz on 3rd down. So it's just, everything about development, and we'll see what he can do. I still think it's a better group, though, just getting Bobby Okereke in there compared to what they had last year. I do have my eyes on Darian Beavers. He was drafted right along with Micah McFadden. Now, obviously, they like McFadden more, and I'm not going to complain about that. I liked McFadden as well, but I did think Beavers had a little bit more of a complete game coming out. was asked to actually cover a little bit more, defend the run at a more consistent level in college. So if McFadden really falters, I think Beaver's really the only guy here that they could turn to other than the street free agent market, which they did last year quite a bit. But yeah, Beavers, I wouldn't be stunned if he could play a little bit. Beyond that, Carter Coughlin and Cam Brown, I'm honestly a little bit surprised they're still here. They're layovers from the previous regime. Both guys were more edge players who have been asked to play more off-ball linebacker here. They haven't shown much, but they are good athletes, and maybe they could surprise. But I am definitely a little bit surprised that they are, right now, like one of them will, if not both of them, will make the team. They just haven't shown anything. But it's definitely a split group that makes it a little bit hard to rank because it's hard to know just how big of a liability Micah McFadden will be for them. So they rank 21st in both linebacker coverage and linebacker run defense. Still not a huge strength for this team, obviously, but they were bottom 4 at least last year. So this is definitely an upgrade there. And then you get to the secondary, and it's there's a couple pieces that I'm like, all right, we know who's playing. We know what you're hopefully going to get from them. Those are pieces that I like in safety Xavier McKinney, Adoree Jackson, first-round rookie Deonte Banks. That's like 3 out of 5 spots. We're like, all right, that's pretty damn good, honestly. But 2 spots where it's like, what the hell is going on here? And they don't know at this point in time what is going on. Now, I think they've thrown a lot of resources at this to hopefully sort this out with a good coaching staff. And I think, again, it's better than the motley crew of street free agents that they were sorting through last year. But they're still going to have to find answers at safety 2 and cornerback 3. But let's start by talking about those 3 established starters here, or at least the confirmed starters at cornerback. You got Adoree Jackson, who had a really good year last year. Wink Martindale's scheme for Adoree Jackson is really just such a aesthetically pleasing scheme fit. He can run, he can go man coverage, he's got good ball skills. He's not the most snappy man-to-man corner or anything like that, but he can absolutely play in a cover 1 blitz-heavy system. We saw that last year. He's a very good corner. They're happy to have him. And it was very noticeable when he went down in the middle of the season, just how much they missed him. So hopefully he can stay healthy and be a good CB1 for them. And then you got Deonte Banks as your second corner here, and talk about reasons why I'm a little bit higher in this Giants defense. There you go, man. I mean, Deonte Banks was my 8th overall player in this draft class. It was a lesser class in that kind of 6 to 20 range of prospects, but I thought Deonte Banks was at the top of that range. I see a potential number 1 corner when I watch him. I see every athletic box checked. He's 6'1", 195 pounds, which if you look at like all the top corners in the league, they're all right around that mark because it's big enough to hang size-wise, but light enough to have the speed and movement skills to cover at a high level. So he's there. He ran 4.340. He's what do you have, 40, was it a 40 and a half inch vertical jump, I think? I mean, I got it right in front of me. 42 inch vertical jump, 136 inch broad jump, like freaky athleticism. But it wasn't just the physical tools. You watch the film and you fall in love. He loves press coverage. He's super physical. He's going to be a perfect fit for this defense. He's got a springy route recognition and route squeeze in man coverage. And then the other thing that just really set me over the edge on Deonte Banks was the zone IQ. He was super brilliant in any sort of zone that they called, and they called it all. They called cover 2, cover 4, cover 3, and he showed communication, mid-play, passing off routes. What is not to like about Deonte Banks, other than the fact that when the ball's in the air, he does struggle to locate it, and that might be something that always holds him back a little bit, and that's a big difference between him and Devon Witherspoon in this draft. But if that's the biggest thing you got to work on is getting your head around and timing up and kind of reading the receiver's hand gestures and knowing when the ball's coming. If that's all you got to work on, that's That's pretty damn good for a corner. So loved this draft pick. Could not believe they were able to get him when they got him. And like I said, I think he alone makes me a little bit higher on this Giants team. So I love that, even if he's a rookie. And then you've got Xavier McKinney, who didn't quite have a big year last year like I think a lot of Giants fans were hoping for. And I think he can get back on that track towards heading towards being like a star safety. Right now, I think he's just a very good starter. They like him as the free safety, and he's got the range and instincts and IQ to play that for sure. But he's got the flexibility to come down, play some strong safety, man up some tight ends. Just a very good, versatile safety that is only 25. The injury definitely, I think, delayed his development a little bit, but the arrow could definitely be pointing back up for Xavier McKinney. And if nothing else, I'm just not worried about him at all. But I do think it's only natural that you're at least somewhat worried about the rest of these starters here. So let's talk about the slot corner. It's like, where do you want to start? There's like 5 different guys that could be in the mix here for the slot corner job. Potentially the front runner right now is Trey Hawkins. I'll just throw that out there right now. He's been just balling out in camp apparently, and has been running with the ones pretty much every day. And he's a 6th round pick out of Old Dominion. I think this team showed last year they're going to play who they feel is best for them. And if he wins this competition, so be it. I'll trust that they found something there out of Old Dominion. I didn't get to his tape, so I don't really know too much about him, but all eyes will be on him if he's starting week 1 trying to cover CeeDee Lamb in the slot, right? So we'll see there. I think Cordell Flott as well. If he can win this job, you're feeling pretty good about it. He probably is the quote-unquote higher upside option in the slot. He showed a lot of flashes last year, but never really grabbed hold of a starting slot job despite the opportunity being there while they had injuries, and Darnay Holmes kind of struggled. So we'll see. Again, between Flott and Hawkins, I think those are your if either of them win the job, you're cautiously optimistic. Darnay Holmes, this pains me to say that's possibly a worst case scenario, because I loved Darnay coming out. He's shown a lot of flashes. He's made some plays in the big leagues, if you will, but he really did get picked on last year, and this is year 4 for him. Was penalized 9 times last year too, so some of that college grabbiness hasn't really been weeded out of his game. So I'm unfortunately not so much optimistic that Darnay Holmes is going to click in at this point. I loved him as a prospect, man. Graduated from UCLA in 3 years, was super fun at the Senior Bowl, but it just hasn't been there. But I do think he's in the mix. I mean, he did play 630 snaps for them last year, but all reports right now is he's falling behind this competition, behind what sounds like Hawkins and Flott. And then you also have to mention Aaron Robinson. He's on the PUP, was injured last year. He's been injured since he came into the league. I said Flott probably has the best physical tools. I think Robinson has the best physical tools if he could ever get back healthy. That's really the thing with him. Thought he was a good 3rd-round pick. He's got size and quickness to do a little bit of everything from the slot, but he's just been entirely unproven. So right now, he's obviously falling behind the 8 ball in terms of getting on the field there. And then I think you also got to throw out the possibility, because it sounds like Jason Pinnock is in the mix for that starting safety job. You also got to throw out the possibility that Bobby McCain is their starting slot corner. McCain has played, I don't know how many snaps at slot corner, but it's thousands and thousands of snaps as a slot corner, and he's been pretty good at it. And like I said in the intro, McCain has really impressed me last year for the Commanders. Now, that was as a kind of a hybrid safety running a lot of quarters. It's a different scheme here, but I think McCain should be out there one way or another, whether that's at slot corner or as their second safety. And if he's not, it's one of those things where either McCain isn't as good as I think he is, or one of these young players is really trending up. You just don't really know what that means if that's what ends up happening, where McCain's not starting. But that's kind of your 5 options as a slot corner. Just completely wait and see. And as we've seen around the league, if you've got one weak link in that secondary, one real weak link, teams will target you, especially in the Giants case where they know you're going to be in man coverage about as much as anybody. It would be really nice if the Giants didn't have to suffer that again, where like last year it was like Nick McLeod really felt like the guy, like teams were just going right at him, like prove that guy can make a play. And they're risking that being the case again, even though I think the competition is better and healthier and more talented than it was last year, quite clearly. And then we kind of talked about that second safety spot already. I would just say I'm optimistic that Bobby McCain will win that job out in camp. I do think he's a talented player. He's a smart veteran, can do exactly what Julian Love did for them, who played over 1,000 snaps as a starting safety for them last year. If McKinney's playing free safety, if you're running a lot of cover one, cover zero, obviously, whether they're the free safety or the strong safety, you want these guys to be able to play man-to-man coverage, and McCain can do that. He's got that slot corner experience like I described, and I'd feel much more comfortable with him as the starting safety than I would with Jason Pinnock. Even though I liked Pinnock coming out, he's shown some flashes for this Giants team. They picked him up from the Jets. He was a corner as well, who they are converting to safety. He's been a pretty good run defender, so you like that side of things. The tackling has been really good for him. He's a great special teamer to have. But yeah, if things are clicking for him now into year 2, year 3 as an actual safety, he's got really smooth hips. He's got good speed. He's got the size. He could potentially be a safety. He's just another one of these really unproven parts. So there is your kind of starting secondary conversation. It's going to be very wait and see over the next few weeks to see how they sort through this. And it's going to be very wait and see once the season starts, as early as week 1 against Dallas, against 3 really good receivers. Polarizing nonetheless. Now let's cover any other depth here that we haven't so far. They did pick up Amani Oruwariye. I'm not counting on him too much. He really fell off for Detroit last year and really fell off when they asked him to try to play man coverage. He's got some ball skills, has some football IQ, but I'm pretty pessimistic that, I don't even know if he's going to make the team, honestly. Just feels like he was kind of a flash in the pan. Rodarius Williams, I like his game as a zone corner. Similarly, I just don't know how good of a scheme fit he is here for the Giants. If he gets cut and I'm a team that runs one of those Fangio-style defenses, I would pick him up in a heartbeat. He ran a lot of off quarters in college and was really good at it. So keep an eye on him maybe for somebody else, but I don't really see it here schematically speaking. And then even Zion Gilbert stepped in, played like 100 snaps, and wasn't a huge problem for them last year. So don't be shocked if, Oruwariye and Williams aren't great fits here and they end up sticking with Gilbert, I guess. And then with the safeties, I did like Dane Belton coming out of Iowa. He played a lot last year, and he was one of those guys that was getting picked on a lot in coverage. He's a good athlete with size, but, he was a developmental safety that looked like one thrust into action early. So we'll see what his growth looks like. They are listing Nick McLeod as a safety. Like I said, he got really picked on as a corner, and I like that they're getting him out of that position. He did make some plays, though, was decent in run defense. He might be a decent backup safety in the likes of Jason Pinnock. Just doesn't quite have the athletic tools and the upside. And then they draft Javarius Owens, who is a really rangy free safety type that looked the part out of Houston, but very much a project. So it's really not anything established in the safety room in terms of depth. They do rank towards the bottom in DB run support, tier 5, which is the questionable tier. That really comes from the slot. I don't know much about Trey Hawkins. Maybe he's a pleasant surprise there. But that is one knock on Cordell Flott, is he's really slender and not a great run defender from the slot. Same with Darnay Holmes. He's really struggled to come downfield and tackle. And it's not like they have these super impactful safeties either in terms of run defense. And even Adoree Jackson has struggled. So I don't think you have a clear liability, but questionable is a good way to put it in terms of run support from the defensive backs. And obviously a poor support from the secondary hurt their run defense last year, where we mentioned they were towards the bottom in the league in run defense. So they're going to have to show some improvements there. Ultimately, it's a bit of a polarizing defense, obviously with the style, with the blitz-heavy Wink Martindale defense, but also just like within the positions. You know, they have a polarizing secondary. They have a polarizing linebacker group. The D-line really is what keeps this whole thing together to look like a pretty good defense at the end of the day. But they are a little bit more towards the middle of the league. I've got them 18th in pass defense. Very respectable, despite some question marks. And then 14th in total run defense. It's kind of somewhere between where they were in the second half of last year and where their upside could be as a really good run defense if they could clean up some of the linebacker and secondary questions. Because there's really no good excuse when you have Dexter Lawrence to not be a top 10 run defense, and I think they could be. For now, they're, again, 14th in run defense and 14th for overall defense. But let's tie a ribbon on the New York Giants before we get to the interview with Bengal. They're a balanced team, ultimately. They're 16th on offense, 14th on defense. As far as the special teams is concerned, it's fine. Graham Gano had a bit of a down year last year, but I'm not necessarily worried about him. I think they added some more depth to be pretty good on the coverage unit and take care of things there. Not worried about it, but not going to say it's a benefactor for the Giants either. Let's look at their strengths and weaknesses as a recap here. Strengths, offensive coaching with Brian Daboll. You got to start there. But running back is also a strength for what it's worth to help out the run game, along with, of course, that QB run game that changes the numbers, and Daniel Jones provides some explosiveness in his own right. And then defensively, you have an awesome two-way defensive line that will both defend the run and defend the pass. And then, if nothing else, they have a true defensive identity. They know what they want to do. They're going to play fast and not be apologetic about it. And I think it sounds weird to say that, but it really did feel like a true presence for this Giants team last year. They just feel like they were having fun playing defense, and I think that counts for something, right? I don't know. Anyway, weaknesses. The receiving core is a weakness relative to the league. It's significantly better than it was last year. It is very unestablished, and you might feel a lack of consistency from that group, but they do have a little bit of everything, right? They got their possession guy, they got their mismatched tight end, they got a couple deep threats, they got some gadget slot pieces. It could work. It could work. Unestablished secondary as well. I think there's upside with the slot corner and safety too, but it's just going to come down to the coaching making that work. And then the second linebacker is a potential weakness as well, depending on how McFadden turns out. But our last order of business here before we bring in Bengal for the interview here is to take a look at their Vegas over-under, their schedule, and my win total expectations for this team. And Vegas is definitely in the court of all of you in the YouTube comments that think I have the Giants too high. They have their Vegas over-under at 7.5 wins, 50-1 Super Bowl odds. That I kind of get. Like, the upside in this team is still getting there with a lot of different spots. But, that win total at 7.5, I think, is interesting. That's a lot lower, surprise, surprise, than I see them at. I've got them coming out at 8.6 wins in my formula. Yeah, if this team last year, with one hand tied behind their back, can get to 9 wins and then go and win a playoff game on the road, I think this roster can absolutely get to 8 as like a floor for this team. Now, their ceiling might not be that much higher than that, but I look at their schedule and yeah, they have some really hard games. They've got 2 games against Philly that are going to be tough. At Dallas, week 10 is going to be tough. At San Francisco, at Miami, at Buffalo. Those games are definitely why their over-under is quote-unquote so low, because that's probably 0-6 in those games, which means you have to go 8-3 in the rest of these games to get over 7.5 wins, or go 7-4 with a big upset, which is also possible. But I definitely see 8 games that are very winnable for them. You got Arizona week 2, probably no Kyler Murray there. Inversely, you get the Rams late in the season when Matthew Stafford's not going to be there. So that's probably 2 there. You got 2 against Washington. not gimmies, but can you split against Washington, beat Green Bay and Seattle at home, beat Las Vegas on the road, and then steal one against either the Jets, the Saints, or the Patriots? That all sounds pretty in line for me with this Giants team. So I like the over. I think you're betting on Brian Dable. You're betting on some growth from some of these players for sure, but it's up there for one of my favorite bets in terms of over-unders this year. But that's going to do it from my end. We are now going to roll the interview with the amazing Bengal. I'm just going to say my goodbyes now. Thank you so much for watching. Do not go anywhere, though. You're not going to want to miss this interview. And we'll see you for the next deep dive after that. Peace. And now the best part of the deep dive, we get to welcome in another YouTuber and one of the better NFL minds on the platform. Bengal, thank you for joining us. How you doing today, buddy?
That's high praise. Thank you for letting me be on here, not the Bengals one. That's a nice distinction.
As always, representing your Giants. Yeah. So definitely a team that surprised a lot of people last year. I'm sure yourself included, winning a playoff game, coming over here to Minnesota and taking down the Vikes. But new expectations next year for sure. They decided to bring back Daniel Jones. And I want to know your kind of thoughts on your reaction as a fan paired with your NFL knowledge, kind of what was your guttural reaction when they decided to bring back DJ?
It is too much money. Like it just is. However, that is the trend for quarterback contracts and really contracts across the NFL, but especially quarterbacks getting more and more and more expensive. And obviously, he's not on the same level of Patrick Mahomes, right? But we see that contract, and it seemed like so much at the time. And then now it's obviously that's such a team-friendly deal, if anything. And Daniel Jones, my big issue with him, even though in 4 years the contract might not look so bad for money, it's just he has not played nearly to that level. So it's really tough to guarantee all that money and lock yourself into a quarterback who has not really shown a ton to be like far exceeding a bridge quarterback potential at this point. We'll see. I mean, he's super athletic. I don't know that the arm's ever going to be incredible. Accuracy's got to take a step up, but he can earn that money for sure. It's just he's got to play a lot better, and he was better last year. But he had the training wheels on for sure. We'll have to see what year 2 looks like under Brian Daboll.
Yeah, it's just kind of like that fear of getting stuck in purgatory, right? Is that
Exactly.
kind of the first thing that kind of crept into your mind? Does your gut kind of tell you that they will like maybe pull the trigger to move up in the draft someday, or do you think like are you actually afraid you're going to be in a Kirk Cousins situation where he's your quarterback for the next 8 years and you're stuck there?
Yeah, I think it ultimately will depend on the next couple of seasons, as like obvious as that seems to say.
Mm-hmm.
He, I think, definitely could be good enough, and like the Vikings could be successful with Kirk Cousins. They just haven't done enough around him. Am I a huge Kirk Cousins guy? No, but I do recognize he's good enough when you see Jared Goff make it to a Super Bowl, and Jimmy Garoppolo, and Nick Foles played out of his mind and won one. So, I mean, you don't necessarily need that top guy to win a Super Bowl, although it is a lot easier if you have them to get there.
That's a great point. Yeah. And hopefully having a guy like Brian Dable calling the plays is only going to help elevate that. So one of their more fascinating draft picks this year was Jalen Hyatt. Kind of falls, I suppose, to the top of the third, depending who you ask, I suppose. But what are your expectations for him, like to step in and be a part of the offense?
Supposedly in camp, he's moving up the depth chart. I don't know if you can hear this. There's a leaf blower, right next to my window.
I was like, are you at a monster truck rally right now?
So in camp, Jalen Hyatt has actually started to earn a lot more opportunities. He's kind of getting worked in with the first teamers, and the Giants really just don't have that pure deep threat aside from Jalen Hyatt. Like Paris Campbell's fast and has really just kind of worked underneath for the Colts a lot in his career, and he could be used more as somebody that stretches the field, a clear out in 2023. We'll have to see, but Hyatt, I think, is one of those guys like prime Jalen Guyton with the Chargers, where that's the guy that stretches the field, and he's going to have big opportunities to make big plays because of how dangerous and deadly that speed is. I know Jalen Guyton is an insane comp, but that's what he did for the Chargers offense. And Hyatt, I think, will earn more opportunities in year one than I initially would have thought. They have so many slot receivers. He's somebody that I think can actually not work in an underneath role. So he's going to be valuable for that alone. I think he's going to get worked in. It's just the deep threat over the top is just too valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I can already picture like Dable loves those deep crossers, and he's the guy that like you can definitely just picture him, catching it 20 yards down the field and breaking away it from the defense and actually providing a little explosiveness, which I think this team was dead last year in explosive plays. So,
I haven't seen a touchdown of over 20 yards in like 5 years.
Oh my God, that's not a real thing.
Sorry,
Feels
I'm
like it
talk
though.
over you there.
Yeah. So the other kind of, I guess, position battle, if you will, with the offense, at least what I was kind of reading up on, is that the guard situation is kind of in flux right now. I was wondering if you've kept up to sort of what they're doing there. It sounds like they're flirting with the idea of Mark Lewinsky maybe taking a seat. Is there anything to that, or do you think they're just, kind of playing around?
I think Lewinsky ends up starting at right guard. I think what's more up in the air is left guard. It's a bad position. I mean, both guard spots are really. Lewinsky was super disappointing in year one for the Giants, but Joshua Azudu is just not ready. Ben
Mm-hmm.
Bredesen, if I had to put money on it, I would say he's going to start at left guard, but he's Ben Bredesen. He's not,
Yeah.
exceptional. And Shane Lemieux, I'm not sure if he's going to end up making the team. I think the one wild card could be Tyree Phillips earning snaps
Mm.
at one of the guard spots. Right now, he's just kind of like like offensive lineman number 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say swing tackle or guard. He's just gonna, I think, play wherever they need somebody to, and he's definitely improving. I would love to see him get some chances, but right now I would say if I had to put it in, Bredesen left guard and Glowinski right guard, and you're obviously looking to upgrade in any way possible.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see about Azuedu. I kind of liked him coming out a little bit, but like you said, he's just not ready. So just, yeah. And then the linebacker 2 spot, obviously they bring in Bobby Okereke. Is it going to be was it the Ole Miss linebacker or what's the other linebacker that they drafted in the 5th round last year? He's going to be the other
Darian
starter
Beavers from Cincy.
there.
He was a 6th round pick. They have Micah
No, I'm thinking
McFadden
of
from Indiana.
Micah McFadden.
Okay.
So, oh wow, I'm just in shock right now because I already recorded the deep dive and they had McFadden listed as the LB2, but now it's Darian Beavers. So is that going down right now? Is Beavers LB2?
Is ESPN listing that?
I was just looking at our lads.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of thought it was going to be Micah McFadden,
Yeah.
and I don't know. Their unofficial depth chart, which came out yesterday, has Darian Beavers ILB2.
Mhm.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like on the fly figuring that out.
Some of these I don't like necessarily even believe though. Like Darnay Holmes has looked disgusting in camp in a bad way. I mean, and he's listed as their starting nickel, and I'm not really sure that happens. I think it could be him even getting more slot reps like he has. I don't think Trey Hawkins starts on the outside at least right away. Late
Mhm.
round pick out of Old Dominion, but he fits what Wink wants to do. All you have to
Yeah.
be physical, big, strong, fast, and that's him. And in a scheme where you're playing man free 40-50% of the time almost, all you need to do is press and give your blitzes a second or two to get in. So I don't know, but yeah, back to linebacker. Like these, I don't know whether to believe the unofficial depth chart right now. I know it's like you can, but I think a lot of these are going to be ultimately decided in preseason, and we just haven't seen the Giants play a preseason game yet. So
Mhm.
we shall see.
Yeah.
Beavers and McFadden should be close. I think what ultimately gives McFadden the edge is that he played last year where Beavers was sidelined with a big injury. So if Beavers have done enough in training camp to take over the ILB2 spot, hats off to him. He might end up being a pretty nice player.
Yeah. We'll see how that one plays out. Um I know you talked a little bit about the cornerback spot there. So you're buying into the Trey Hawkins hype, you think? I mean, literally before everyone kind of knew the Giants deep dive was coming, everyone's like, make sure you talk about Trey Hawkins. He's balling out. It's like the classic camp hype thing. Yeah. Have you like gone back and done any like post draft research on him to kind of see if there might be something there? What have you kind of learned about him specifically?
I did as soon as he was drafted because I
Mhm.
didn't know the name, which is, kind of rare because, you and I both, we can't get to
Mhm.
everybody in
Right.
film study, but you hear names at least a lot of the time. And I did not hear his name at all. And then you saw, Math Bomb, Kent Lee Platt tweet out the RAS, and then it's near a 10. And he's a height, weight, speed freak. And if those guys can move pretty well, which his agility testing was pretty good, you have someone that at least has the makings of being able to play the position at a high level. And who knows? I think if you're earning first team reps in camp, like that's pretty impressive before the first preseason game. If you're
Mhm.
shifting Adoree Jackson, who is far and away the best outside corner the Giants have, if you're forcing him into the slot, and that might just be because of how bad Darnay Holmes has looked, for example, and Cordell Flott has not impressed either, which you kind of were hoping that he would. But if you're
Mhm.
forcing your best outside corner into the nickel, well, you might be pretty decent. So obviously, it's too early to tell. We have to see him in a game, see him in multiple games, and I don't know. I'm going to say I'm bullish because of the athletic upside.
Yeah.
It's not like Brock Purdy's playing unbelievable and he could be the next best quarterback in the league. I don't necessarily believe it's, one of those situations
Yeah.
because of the athletic floor of those players, or ceilings. But Trey Hawkins is athletic as anybody, and that will play sometimes.
I actually didn't know that his RAS was that high,
It
so
was
I'm
like a
glad you brought that up.
9-9.
Yeah, that's nuts. And the fact that it's like it's Old Dominion, right? So he obviously dominated that level of competition, but if he's got the traits and he steps in and right away looks the part, it's like that's where you can really start to think, okay, maybe this is a true like diamond in the rough. So probably the one guy, like I can understand why the hype is there and why all those comments were coming in on him. All right, so this is something new. I haven't done this with a guest yet, but I figured because you're a draft guy, I know you're a Madden guy at times, and I wanted to do a little like giant snake draft deal, where we're trying to build the best like roster from like we each get to build a roster from the Giants roster.
So are we
The
building like a
only
7-on-7 type team, or are we trying to actually construct a team that's going to be able to play?
Yeah, so I figured we can draft 10 players each and we'll just imagine the rest of it's an 11 on 11 team and we're
Okay.
just going to imagine the spots that we weren't filled are just going to fill in with like replacement level
Okay.
low end starters.
I
So we'll
get
just,
that.
vanilla players at those positions. And then the other catch is Daniel Jones is just going to play both sides of the ball for us because obviously the QB is so important. Unless you think Tyrod Taylor is better than Daniel Jones, you can draft him, I guess.
If I
um,
speak, I will
so
be in trouble.
so I will give you your choice. We're gonna snake draft it. So I'll give you your choice on if you want the first pick or if you want.
I'll take number 2.
Okay, so you'll take the turn.
Yeah.
All right. So I theoretically have to draft the best player on the Giants, and there's probably two clear picks here. I'm gonna take Dexter Lawrence,
Ooh,
the
yeah,
nose tackle.
that's a pretty good shout.
In part because there's not really any good interior linemen for you to draft, so he's only going to eat more. But you look at the way he finished the year last year. I mean, his performance against the Vikings was up there for the most dominant defensive performance of the year for any position, and a two-way nose tackle in the modern game, it's just a game wrecker. So we're going to start there.
Yeah, he is unbelievable. And he's been someone that's moved over and played 3 tech and been really good too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a rare combination to find that guy, as you mentioned. You set me up really nicely. I'm going to go Andrew Thomas. He's just one of the best tackles in the league now,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of feels like it came out of nowhere in a way because of how bad his rookie season was. But
Yeah.
tackle's one of those spots that takes a while to develop. Corner as well. That's kind of why I'm so shocked about Trey Hawkins early. But yeah, Andrew Thomas, so good. He'll be number 1 for me. And then I just got to take, I was going to say Saquon. I think I will keep Saquon, just a difference maker. I still value running back. I know it's replaceable, but I think we've gone too far in the other direction where these guys are capable of taking over a game. Look at Saquon, look at Christian McCaffrey, look at Josh Jacobs last year. He was the Raiders offense in the case of Jacobs. So I'll take Saquon and feel pretty good about it.
Okay. So I'm going to take, just because I don't want my offensive line to be a complete train wreck, and there's just not a lot of options to take from, I'm going to take John Michael Schmitz just as a supply and demand pick. I did love him. Thought it was a complete steal coming out in the second round. Thought he easily could have gone in the first. I wouldn't have blinked an eye. And the fact that he already won the starting job for the Giants, I think, only reinforces that belief. So we're gonna patch up the O-line a little bit there, and then I think I will take. I'm gonna take Darren Waller. I'm gonna risk
really
that he can
good.
stay healthy, and I think he's the one potential difference maker from the receiving group that you can get there. So I'm gonna take him.
Yeah, no, he's looked really good in camp.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely looks like he's going to be a big factor in the offense this year. I'm going to start with Kayvon Thibodeau. There's not a lot of edge talent on this team. So I'm tempted to double dip and go Azeez Ojulari. And I'm not locking that in, but I am going to lock it in. We're going to see what happens for you. I'm going to go Azeez and Kayvon, and good luck with O'Shea and Zimenez.
Not a big Jihad Ward fan.
He's a great team guy. Great locker room presence. It's true.
He's been in a Wink Martindale system for like 9 years straight around the league.
The Ravens, he was doing the same thing.
I might end up just getting replacement level fillers on the edge, but I think I'll take Leonard Williams, who can play a little bit of edge for me, depending what kind of front I'm running. And then it starts to get really tough. I think I'll roll the dice that Evan Neal's going to have a breakout year in year two, just in a similar light to what Andrew Thomas did. Probably not going to take that big of a leap, but I think he just, learned to get out of his stance a little better, clean up the footwork a little bit. I still believe in him coming out as, sixth overall pick, whatever he was. So we'll go Neal.
Yeah, I think that's playing to his upside. You hope he takes a big step up this year. I'm going to go grab the next two best DBs on the team. I'm going to go Dory Jackson, and I'm going to take Xavier McKinney, who is super important when the Giants, if we're going to run what the Giants are running, he's playing single high over the top in man coverage. So super valuable to get those guys. Dory Jackson, X.
Yep. Okay, well, I'll take Deonte Banks. Gotta love the first round corner out of Maryland. I had him as a top 10 player in the draft. So for me to get him now, just like he fell in the real life draft, I think he's starting to slip a little bit in our draft. So you just address the secondary. I'll follow suit there. And then it starts to get real tough. The receiver group, it's kind of like you can just wait because there's so many different guys. They're all kind of in the same breath. I guess I'll take Bobby Okereke, I guess. He's a good player. I'm not a big linebacker guy, but I'm leaving you with a pile of heap at that position, and I get a good player that can run sideline to sideline and cover and play run defense.
I think it's underrated to be built strong up the middle. You talk about that in baseball all the time, like catcher, pitcher, middle infield, center field. And I think when the Giants are running so much single high, you got Xavier McKinney to now Okereke, Dexter Lawrence, and then on the other side, John Michael Schmitz, and then your quarterback and running back, right? I think obviously you got to have some guys on the outside, but I think being built strong up the middle is so important. I think Okereke is going to really make that Giants defense a lot more dependable and solid this year. And they were decent last year, but we've seen it before with Wink. He comes in, the extremely aggressive approach works well early, and then it all falls apart. And maybe that's a personnel and team building issue, but Right now, I think Bobby Okereke is certainly really, really good. Loved him in Indy, and I think he's going to be a beast in 2023. I'm hoping for it at least.
I did pick up on something because, like, I've never been of the opinion that linebackers can make that big of a difference, but I did notice, like, when Tay Crowder was starting, they were 32nd in defensive run defense DVOA, and then when they benched him, they climbed up, like, from that point on to 24th, and it's like, maybe it's just don't be complete ass at linebacker, and that's what you go for, and you're definitely not complete ass with Bobby Okereke.
No, he is he's really. I think he's probably moving toward a top 10 linebacker in the league, off ball, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he's quite there yet, but I think
Yeah, I
he
could
is
agree with that.
fairly close.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm tempted here to go Jalen Hyatt. I think I'm going to, just because the options are slimming down,
Mm-hmm.
and he, like we talked about earlier, offers a really unteachable combination of a speed and just ability to long stride over the top. And yeah, we'll see if he gets refined as a route runner. I'm not sure that's ever going to be his game. Hopefully it will be. But I'm going to go Jalen Hyatt, and I'll go Isaiah Hodgins. We'll take
Mm,
two different types of
dang,
receivers.
I
Hodgins was
love.
dependable last year. I think he
I.
played the playoff game with a broken foot.
Are you serious?
I
He
want
was
to
good
say
in
I
that
heard
game
that.
too. Wow, cortisone is a beautiful drug, I suppose.
Oh yeah, get a little injection, you were good to go. Good as new.
Yeah, dude, I was digging back. Because I loved him coming out, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I tweeted some nice hype on Hodgins, and it was a response to Daniel Jeremiah where he was saying, I think he said like Isaiah Coulter is the best hands in the draft, and I said no, it's Isaiah Hodgins, and it's not even close. I'm like, dang, how does this only have like 10 likes and a retweet? Like this
You got to
was,
throw to retweet. You just get it
yeah,
circulating
I got to
again.
slap it back
Wait for
out
him
there
to have a
again.
big game if it happens in 2023, and then just oops, I
Yeah,
accidentally retweeted my own tweet or reposted, as they're saying now.
yep. I said there's shades of Adam Thielen in Isaiah Hodgins, and I think
Ooh,
that's kind of coming through.
I can
Um,
see that.
all right, so I believe I have two, you have two, and then I have one more. Does that sound right to you?
That does.
We're professional podcasters here. We're not writing this down.
No, I think I have 8 picks so far, so I might have
I believe
2.
so.
Yeah.
You can count that up while I make my next couple. All right. I'm going to go back to the secondary, I think. Although there's not. You know what? He's listed now as the third string safety, but I like Bobby McCain. I think he can play. I was watching Commanders film for the Commanders deep dive, and I thought that was a really sneaky pickup. I can't believe he's buried so deep on their first depth chart here. But I think he can play slot corner or free safety or strong safety. There's not a whole lot of options that I can really trust left on the board. So I know it's a little controversial, but I'm going to take McCain, and then I'll keep building up the trenches with Ashawn Robinson, who was another kind of sneaky good pickup. So I've got the 3 starting interior linemen with Ashawn, Dexter, Leonard. I can go a little base 3-4. I can go a little, hybrid front. Put Leonard out there as a 5 tech. I'm feeling pretty good about taking down your interior O line.
Yeah. I think those are good picks. I think I would have taken Ashawn with the next pick, but it sounds like Bobby McCain could end up being a cap casualty coming out of camp,
Mm.
just because they have nothing really guaranteed to him, and it's 1 year. But I agree with you. I thought he has been good, but I don't know what 2023 will look like if he makes the team, which I kind of would be surprised to see him get cut just because of the depth there. I don't know if you can really trust Jason Pinnock. I mean, there's a reason he's still available in our little draft here.
Mm-hmm.
He's still going to be. I'm going to go a different way for my last 2.
I will say, like, I think that'd be a pretty big mistake to cut him because you're trying to figure out slot corner and safety, and he can literally do both of those things potentially better than anybody else there. I would just be really surprised.
Yeah, I hope Aaron Robinson is somebody that you can end up trusting
Mm,
in the
yeah.
nickel. He's at least an option.
Hmm.
So let's see. I'm thinking about taking Mark Lewinsky just because I could use an interior offensive lineman. And I'm thinking about Raheem Nunez Roches. Those are kind of my top options right now.
Mm,
And it's slim pickings out there. So yeah, I guess I'll lock that in.
yeah. You need someone that can hopefully hold up against Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams and Ashawn Robinson.
Yeah, we're gonna get steamrolled.
You can trust Josh's Wadu to do that.
Ugh.
So you still have one more, right, to fill out the roster.
No, I think that's 10.
You took Lewinsky and
Nunez Roches.
you did take Nunez
Yeah,
Roches.
so
Okay,
nose tackle and
the
IOL.
sneaky free agents are flying off the board.
He's good at being in the way. That's his whole game.
Yeah,
I think he's
no, he's been
also
good for
from
the Bucks.
Belize. Fun fact. I think he's Belizean.
So my strategy was just to kind of see what receivers you took and then take whatever was left. So we'll do that. I'm between, I think, Wandale Robinson, who did show a lot of promise last year, be a good slot piece. Probably not going to take Paris Campbell just because I don't trust that he can hold up health wise. Same with Sterling Shepard. So yeah, I will take Wandale Robinson and hope he can get back healthy and at least be a gadget player. And Darren Waller better stay healthy because otherwise I have absolutely no big bodies to throw to. So that was it. I thought that was fun.
Oh yeah.
Definitely, everybody. I'll put these teams up, and you guys can let us know in the comments down below who drafted the better team. Maybe someone can put them together in a Madden head to head, and we'll see who wins. Yeah, as we know, the Madden Sim engine is the ultimate
Oh yeah.
decider
So
of
good.
who's a better football team.
It's a disaster.
Thank you so much for coming on, Bengal. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think the over under for Giants wins is low. I'll say that it's at 7.5,
Mm-hmm.
according to the experts in Vegas. Right.
Yep,
I
the
think
experts.
like the schedule is tougher, and the
Mm-hmm.
Giants were the benefactor or beneficiary. I always get those mixed up. No, they're
Yep, me too.
yeah, they were. I think benefactor is who gives, and beneficiary is who is receiving of. So I think the Giants were the beneficiary of a great record in 1-1 or like one score games.
Mm-hmm.
And like I didn't believe it with the Vikings last year. I just don't think that's something that can hold up. I mean, obviously we saw it for the Vikings for a whole season pretty much, and then not in the playoffs, immediately out. The
Mm-hmm.
Giants, though, I think did get a lot better in the offseason.
Yeah.
And I don't see a way where they win under 7. Tough schedule, but I think they're going to rise to the occasion. And really, the only time last year that I can remember seeing the Giants truly get embarrassed, and it happened so much in previous regimes, was the Eagles playoff game. And the Eagles are the second best
Right.
team in the league. So I can live with it a little bit more. But this year, I think they did a better job beefing up front. I think even Raheem Nunez Roches is a complete difference maker.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's not going to play a lot, but first and second down guy, or just
Well, we
first
mentioned
down.
that they were so bad against the run last year. It obviously wasn't Dexter Lawrence's fault and
Yeah.
Leonard Williams' fault. It's those next guys coming in. So now you have Ashawn and Nunez Roches to patch that up, plus a real linebacker behind them. Like they should be able to go from bottom 6 against the run at the end of last year to like top half, and that's a huge difference maker.
Yeah, I'm going to say, where are you on that? I think the Giants can win 9.
I already bet the over, personally. Yeah, I think 9 is like a good safe. Like I don't think this is a super high ceiling team, but with how well they're coached, the improvements they made, I think 8 or 9 is good, and I think 9 can get you another wild card spot in the NFC.
I'm always afraid of a sophomore slump. Oh,
Mm.
Jesus. Slump. Hold on.
Get some OJ. We're leaving that, by the way. We're leaving that.
I'm gonna be so embarrassed. Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm going through puberty at fucking 25. No, I I'm always afraid of a sophomore slump with something like this. You come in, there's so much hype year one. You have such a good record in those close games. It's going to be interesting to see how well they sustain that in 2023. So, yeah, there's always like the threat of, oh man, we thought this was amazing and now they've won 6 games. But, they could also amp it up to 10 or 11. So we'll see. I think they do hit the over. I think 7.5, even with the schedule, seems a bit tough. But yeah, I think the Giants are a playoff team.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy level of expectations for you as a Giants fan. I think it's going to be a fun year. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, make sure you go follow Bengal on YouTube if you aren't already. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you later.